Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired Justice of the New York State Supreme Court. I grew up loving music. I grew up in a musical household. Nobody really played an instrument. My mother played the piano with no lessons, and she used to play by ear, but we didn't have a piano. My father, I grew up as a kid in Brooklyn listening to the radio, and this was in the 1940s when I was a little boy, and it was the era of the big band music when good jazz music was also the popular music of the country with the Dorsey brothers and Glenn Miller, etc., Artie Shaw. And my father really loved music, and we used to listen to WNEW, the Make Believe Ballroom, with Martin Block, and then later William B. Williams and Jerry Marshall were the disc jockeys, and my father would be making pancakes on a Saturday morning, and we'd be listening to the top 40 and all these wonderful songs by Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, all sorts of people, and my father had pretty good taste. He knew who he liked. His favorite vocalist, and he was an Italian-American guy, born here, and it wasn't Frank Sinatra. He liked Frank Sinatra, but he really liked better Nat King Cole. And he also liked, on the female side, Sarah Vaughan, and then Ella Fitzgerald, which he had pretty good taste. And my mom, her taste ran to all the big band music she liked very, very much. And she liked Frank Sinatra as well, and Mario Lanza, Perry Como, and she also liked Liberace because he was a showy piano player, and I guess she wanted to be a piano player. In any event, I never realized where my love of music would lead me. I later on became a manager of two rock bands, one in college and one an Irish rock band later on as a lawyer. But I also, late in life, took up the saxophone and started taking lessons. And my brother Bobby, I regretted the fact that I never took musical lessons. I wasn't deprived, but it just never came up. And it never was on the horizon that I should take music lessons. I never said anything and never asked, and it wasn't offered. So it just never came up. But I always kind of regretted that fact. And my brother was very kind, and for a birthday present, he bought me a sax. And he bought me a top-of-the-line Yamaha alto sax. Now, I really wanted to play tenor sax, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that I'd rather have a tenor sax, but he bought the alto sax without asking. And it turns out I like the alto sax anyway because it was actually smaller and probably better suited to a guy with my frame, than the bigger tenor sax. And I was looking to take lessons. So I asked my friend Henri in France. He had a friend who was an American musician, Marcus Fiorillo, who played the guitar for Roy Haynes, famous jazz drummer, and Roy Haynes' quartet or trio. And he put me in touch with Marcus, and I called Marcus, says, I'm a friend of Henri's from Paris. Oh, Henri, I love him, what can I do for you? I said, Marcus, I'm looking for somebody in New York to teach me alto sax. Marcus said, come and see me. I'm going to play a gig downtown. Let me think about it, and come and see me if you want. Come and see. I'd love to meet you anyway. We'll have a drink, and I'll get a couple of names up for you. So I did, and I went to Soho, and I visited Marcus, whom I never met before. I knew he was the guitar player, so it was easy to pick out. And we had a nice evening at the little place called Salt Peanuts, a jazz club in Soho. And Marcus came up with two names. One of them was very well known and an older man, Lee Konitz, who had his own nonette or a 9-piece band. And he had Lee Konitz was a very, very well established and highly regarded alto sax player for his whole career. And he was getting on in years, and he still was at the pinnacle of his career. And the other one was a young man named Roger Rosenberg. And Marcus said, Roger's a friend of mine. We play studio gigs together. He's a phenomenal musician. He's just as good as Lee Cohn. He's not as well known because he's a young man and he's building his career. He said, but I assure you, he can play just as well. And he said either one of those guys would be great. Lee Konitz does give lessons to some people on occasion, and you could talk to him. And he says, and of course you could talk to Roger. I don't know if he gives lessons. I called Roger on the theory that I wanted to deal with a younger guy, and I figured he would be, more inclined to need the money and give the lessons. And Roger said, on the recommendation of Marcus, he said, I never had students. I don't teach. He said, I don't give lessons, but let's give it a try. So I went to Roger's apartment in Manhattan Towers on West 43rd Street, around 10th Avenue. And Manhattan Towers are two large 30-story apartments filled with performing artists and people in the arts. And they're subsidized by New York City. It's a great idea. All these people are the people who work in any capacity on Broadway or in TV or in movies or anywhere in the creative arts, whether they're musicians, writers, authors, what have you. And their income or their rent is based on their income because artists have fluctuating incomes from year to year. One year is very great and the other year is dry. And if your income goes up, you pay a higher rent the following year. And if your income is down, you pay a lower rent the following year. It's a very, very intelligent system and it works very, very well. And of course, down in the lobby, there's notices on billboards for auditions for everything. This is coming up, that's coming up, this film, that show, what have you. And it's a really nice atmosphere. And I went up to Roger's apartment, a very nice apartment up there on the 10th floor, and he had his wife's piano. His wife was also a concert pianist. Her name was Benita Meshalam. And she taught and she also played classical music. And she was on Steinway's list. She would get free piano from Steinway anywhere she played because she was that good. In any event, and by the way, Paquito de Rivera, one of the most famous alto sax players in the world, lived right down the hall. He was a Cuban exile or Cuban refugee. Anyway, he left Cuba. So Roger and I were playing, and we got to be good. And we got to be friends. We became friendly over the weeks and the months that followed. And he was an excellent teacher, and I was doing pretty well. I enjoyed it, and he was very, very good. I got personal attention from him, and it worked out very, very well. And one day after a lesson, Roger said, I have to leave quickly, Rudy. He said, we're going to wrap up and I want to get out of here quickly. I have to go for my lesson. I said, Roger, hold on a second. You take lessons? Now, Roger was a studio musician. He was the first call on his saxophone to play on any recording dates or any big musical projects that were around that needed professional musicians. He said, yeah, no, I take lessons. He said, I take lessons in classical composition. I'm taking a master class with one professor who's very, very accomplished guy. He says, and I love classical music. I write classical music. He said, and I'm really enjoy it. And I've been doing this for like 3 years. It's a 5-year course, and I'm in the middle of it. He said, I can write music all day long. Now, Roger was a graduate, by the way, of the Berklee School of Music. And his proudest boast was that from the day he graduated college, he never worked another gig. He never had to do anything but earn money as a musician. That's how good he was and how prominent he was. He said, but I'm taking these lessons and I enjoy it. He says, I can write music all day long around the clock. I can't write lyrics. There's no way. I have no ability whatsoever to write a lyric. I said, "Oh, that's really funny." I said, because I had asked him, "Do you also write words?" He says, No, I have no ability." I says, "I wrote words once." And Roger, who's very mild-mannered, he jumped practically at that. He said, "You wrote words?" I said, "Yeah, I wrote some words once." I said, "I put them away. It was about 2 years ago. I got this crazy thought in my head, and a rhyme came to my mind, and I wrote it down because I thought it was a good rhyme." He said, "What's the rhyme?" I said, "The Yanks and the Mets, the Knicks and the Nets, the Giants and the Jets. We root for 'em all, watch 'em play ball, and look what it gets." And it said the song went on, and the name of the song is, "Wait Till Next Year," which is about all sports fans, when they're disappointed, but hope springs eternal. So he laughed. He said, "Give me," and he's not a forceful guy. He's a very mild-mannered guy. All of a sudden, he was very forceful. "Get me those lyrics." I said, "Roger, I can find them. I don't know. They're nothing. No, 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 no. Bring me the lyrics. Bring me the lyrics. Make sure next week you find those lyrics and you bring them here." I said, "Okay, Roger, I'll do that." I took a look, and I did find the lyrics. They were put away underneath my handkerchiefs in a drawer in my bedroom. And I took them out. And next week we had the lesson. And Roger said, "Did you bring those lyrics?" I said, "Yeah, let me see them." And I gave him the two little handwritten note papers that I had. He said, "Can I hold on? I'll give them to you next week." I said, "Sure." Well, 3 nights later, he calls me up on the telephone and he said, "Rudy, listen to this." And he starts playing Benita's piano and he's singing my words, as best he can. And wait, the surprise was it sounded great because the music he wrote perfectly complemented the words I had given him. It was wonderful. It was really nice. I was totally surprised. Nobody was more surprised than I was. He said, "Listen to that. What do you think?" I said, "Oh, that's terrific. Who knew you could make something out of that that was that good?" He said, "Yeah, yeah, all right. I'll see you on Saturday at the lesson." So Saturday morning or Saturday noontime, I go and we have a lesson. And Roger said, "Okay, write more lyrics." I said, "Roger, I can't write lyrics. I wrote once. I was visited by the muse. I don't know. That's it. The muse left. I can't write words. I can't do that stuff." "No, no, no. You can. If you wrote once, I'm telling you, you could do it again. You do it again. All right. I'll tell you what to do. Here's what you do. Write about something you like." I said, "Something I like." He said, "No, no, look, let me tell you. You're involved in boxing." He says, "Write about boxing. I don't care. Just write something about boxing. Anything at all that comes to your mind about boxing." I said, "Okay, Raj." I was dubious. I didn't think I could write anything. But I had given it some thought about his suggestion. Write this, write something about boxing. On my way to work 3 weeks later, I'm stuck at a red light. I'm waiting for the light to change. And a line comes into my head. And I was thinking about a fighter that I managed, a professional fighter that I managed, a young guy. And the words came to mind. He had to be tough from the day he was born to a world filled with nothing but trouble and scorn, for a boy with no future, a kid with no name. And it sounded, I said, "Wait a minute." And I rushed to my office, which was only 2 minutes away, and I wrote out a song. I gave it to Roger. We had it recorded as a demonstration cassette with a friend of his who sang jingles and a piano player who was a studio musician. And the name of the song was "Fight Kid Fight." And eventually, we submitted that song to Sylvester Stallone as a proposed theme for Rocky IV. And the musical director of the film was a guy named Robin Garb. And Robin Garb liked the song and recommended it to Stallone as the theme song for Rocky IV. And Stallone says, "I don't think so. No, I don't know. I don't know." And Robin Garb insisted and brought it back to the next meeting they had when they were talking about music for the film. And he said, "This is the song. You should do this song." Well, Sylvester Stallone turned him down and gave the theme song to his brother, which is understandable. It's his film, and he's putting up all the money and got all the money for it and everything else. And Rocky had been a very successful franchise. So this is going to be a commercially viable proposition no matter what. And he gave the job to his brother, and he did a wonderful job, and they had a theme song. And we lost out. Continued to write stuff, and I wrote one lyric, and typically I would write the lyrics, and Roger would then put them to music. And Roger then gave me one time he had a melody, and he said, "Here, write lyrics to this." And I didn't know what to do. And I was reading, I think it was in a Playboy interview with Billy Joel, and in Playboy magazine back then. And Billy Joel said, he said, "What do you do? You write the words first and then the music?" He said, "Or then, the music and then the words." He said, "It doesn't really matter. Sometimes I write the words. If I have some good words," he said, "I'll write them down and then I'll write the music because the words will suggest it. But other times I have a melody in my head and I write the words. How do you do that?" He said, that's easy. I just keep playing the melody over and over until some words suggest themselves, from the melody. So I tried the Billy Joel method. I had never done it before, and sure enough, I carried it off, and I heard some words, come to me that in the rhythm of the melody that I was listening to, and I gave that to Roger as well. And we were going along, and we ended up writing one song. I wrote a lyric called New York City Skyline. And Roger really liked it, and I really liked it. I knew this was a cut above the stuff I had been writing. It was pretty good stuff. I recognized that it had some quality. I just knew innately that this thing had some quality to it. And Roger, he loved it, and he wrote a melody, and the melody was terrific, and the song was terrific. The problem was it was a standard kind of a song. And now at this point in time, we're talking rock and folk rock and maybe, hard rock, et cetera, et cetera. And where was the market for this kind of thing? You had to get to somebody. This is a standard kind of song, like I Left My Heart in San Francisco, New York City Skyline, that kind of thing. So we want to go to like Tony Bennett or Frank Sinatra or anything else. And I said, Roger, I know because you've always mentioned Alan Kahn is a friend of yours. And Roger had mentioned him. Oh, I work with Alan. I work with Alan. Alan's a friend. Alan was a guitarist, I believe. May have been a drummer, but I think he was a guitarist. And he was a studio musician that worked on many, many gigs with Roger, and they became friends. They just hit it off and became friends. It's a close circle. All of those guys know one another, and some of them grow fond and grow closer than others because they're friends. And Alan Kahn's father is the famous songwriter Sammy Kahn, who wrote any number of standards like Three Coins in the Fountain, Second Time Around, Teach Me Tonight. He wrote a catalog of American standards and became very, very wealthy. I said, if you give this demo, because we had recorded again a demo of New York City Skyline, and just a piano and voice. I said, get this to Alan to give to his father and see if he can help us to get this song maybe to Frank Sinatra. Because you need help getting to somebody like Frank Sinatra or Tony Bennett or any famous Lena Horne or any famous artist, singer. They won't take songs from the public or anything that comes in the mail or anything that comes at random. It has to come through channels that they know, their agents or somebody else. And there's a good reason for that. And that's because there are scam artists out there that send their music to known artists. And then later on, when they record something that's similar, they sue the artist and say, you copied my song. So artists are very, very tentative about accepting music from just anybody. They won't do it. You need a connection. So Roger, he's a shy guy. He said, all right, I'll give it to Alan and see what he thinks. I don't think anything will come of it. So he did. And Alan said to Roger a couple of days later, my father would like to see you and Rudy about this song. Father likes the song and he wants to see you guys. He wants to talk to you about that song. I was shocked. If Sammy Kahn recognized the quality of the song enough to talk, maybe he was just being polite because of his son. We'll find out. So Roger and I get invited to meet Sammy Kahn at his offices on Fifth Avenue, 666 Fifth Avenue, and where he has an office in the big floor that's rented by the famous arbitrageur, the stock arbitrageur, Ivan Boesky. It turns out that Sammy Kahn is very well off, and he's got a lot of money in the stock market. He's also, I think, part owner or owner of Fabergé Cosmetics, the perfume company. And we're up at his office in the suite or the floor that's rented by Ivan Boesky, and it's very fancy and very nice place. And Sammy sat us down. He said, "Listen, Phil," I said, we got over the introductory formalities and everything else, and I was kind of in awe to be in the presence of a songwriter the stature of Sammy Kahn. This guy wrote a good hunk of the American songbook. And Sammy said, "Listen, I wanted to talk to you because the song is excellent. It's very, very, very good." He says, and if you're writing this kind of a song, I want to give you the proper perspective and give you some guidance as to what you should do. So of course we're all ears. He said, first of all, years ago, there used to be songwriters and there used to be singers. Let's say I'm a songwriter and Frank Sinatra is a singer. Well, Frank Sinatra ain't writing any songs. I'm writing the songs. Frank Sinatra's singing the songs, but Sammy Kahn ain't singing any songs. We were dependent on one another. People, they was compartmentalized, and people did what they did, and other people did. Today, he says it's all a mixture. It's a big jumble, and you don't need a good voice to make a song anymore. Years ago, you don't have to be Frank Sinatra or Bing Crosby or Perry Como or anybody else to have a good voice. Anybody could sing, and he rattled off a few examples of people who didn't have very good voices and who were at the top of the pop charts. They were doing very well. He says, now, if you go to these people, are not going to use this kind of material you have. The Frank Sinatras of the world are getting old. Frank is not, for the most part, he's not recording anymore. And if he did, he's not selling very many records anyway. He says it's a very, he's well past it. He's not really interested in doing that kind of thing. And if you want to do this kind of music and you're capable of writing this quality of a song, I have another suggestion. I think you should do what I'm doing. So, well, what's that? He says, I think you should write a Broadway show. You should write show music. I said, how are we going to write show music? He said, well, that's a good question. He said, he said, there's a lot of money in it. He says, songs like this are conducive to Broadway shows. And he said, a Broadway show, and this was back in the 80s, he says, the lyricist, the composer, and the librettist who wrote the play each get about 2% per week, which means of the gross, which means about $10,000 a week. Plus, there's royalties for cast albums, and if there's another show like a big show like Les Mis that has 10 different productions around the world, you can multiply that by 10. There are 10 different companies out there. You'll get $2,000 a week times 10 every week, as long as these shows run. He says, that's what you do. He says, I've been writing with Charles Strauss. Charles Strauss wrote Annie, and I think he wrote Mayer or Fiorello. I'm not sure. And Charles Strauss was on Broadway, what Sammy Kahn was in popular music. He was a well established, big time writer. He says, we bought the rights to the life of Bill Bojangles Robinson, the dancer from Harlem, Mr. Bojangles. And we've been working on that 6 years. He says, now the odds are very, very long, but if you click, he said, you can just go under a palm tree and clip coupons for the rest of your life. You'll have no problem. He says, and that's what I suggest that you do with this kind of a song and this kind of material. And your ability writing lyrics, and Roger's your ability writing these kinds of melodies. That's what I would do. He said, but it's not easy. So well, how do we start? He said, well, BMI, with Broadcast Music Incorporated, and ASCAP, American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, Artists and Publishers. He says they're the big licensing um, organizations, and both of them have workshops for show music because they both realize that show music is a cultivated art. You cannot just step into show music and write show music. You have to learn. It's a craft. You have to learn how to do it. And they want to promote that craft because it's a very American and it's a very good source of income for in the music industry for these licensing people too. Roger was already a member of BMI, and he said they have Sammy said they have the Lehman Engle Musical Theater Workshop. You can apply to join that workshop if they'll accept you, and you can learn to write show music, which is much different than popular music. Popular music, you write one song like Itsy Bitsy, Teeny Weeny, Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. It's a self-contained product. It speaks for itself. That's it. That song is the end all and be all of that effort. Show music, on the other hand, is more involved. The songs you write have to propel the story and have to tell the story. They have to be some up tempo, some melancholy, some slow, some sad, some happy, etc., etc. It's a craft. It takes a long time to learn that, but you can learn it, and it takes a few years. He said, but that's what they do. So who are we to say anything to Sammy Kahn? He's quite a guy, and he was very, very gracious to give us his time, and he gave us good advice. Roger and I spoke, and we decided, all right, we'll submit the song and we'll apply to BMI because he's a member. And we did. We applied to BMI as candidates for their musical theater workshop. Roger as a composer, and I as a lyricist. And they have also composer lyricist in one shot. They get that year anyway, they had 300 applicants from across the country and around the world, and they select 20. And Roger was selected, no surprise. as a composer. He was a monster musician. It was no surprise at all. I made it as a lyricist, which was a total surprise. It could have knocked me over with a feather because I didn't think I had anything, in real. I'm not being falsely modest. I didn't think I had the chops to be in that league with anybody. But apparently they liked the song, and we had to go and perform. I had to perform it separately and had to sing it because the songwriter has to be able to sing his own song to demonstrate it to other people when you want them to sing it. So yes, I even managed enough of a voice to go and sing the song, at least put it over credibly. It didn't have to be good. It just had to be get the idea of the song over. And I was selected, and we spent the next 3 years there. And I was in the company of the most wonderful people at the musical theater workshop, the Lehman Engle musical theater workshop. And they were fabulous. These people were so talented. And we would have these assignments every week. And Roger and I wouldn't necessarily work together. We would work with other people, and they didn't put us together. And I mean, there was one gal there who I would just look forward to hearing whatever she came up with that week for the assignment because everything she did, she hit it right out of the park. It was a grand slam home run. She was that gifted. And it turns out her name is Ann Hampton Calloway, and she's one of the top cabaret singers in the country now. She sings at all the very, very best cabarets in the country. And her sister, Liz, is also a Broadway leading lady, Liz Calloway. So they come from a very musical family. And that's the kind of company I was in. Not to mention, I was in the company of Roger, who worked with Paul Simon, John Lennon, Tito Puente, Sarah Vaughan, Lena Horne, Natalie Cole, Tony Bennett, you name it, Barbara Streisand. So I was in pretty good company, and I was very, very good. And the thing, we kept going, and sooner or later, it just died down. And Roger had to make a living. I had to make a living. My business was getting very busy, we sort of petered out after 3 years, and we haven't done it. I still have these songs, and I'd like to go and peddle them somewhere after all is said and done. But we even had a song we sold to. We didn't sell it. Donald Trump was starting. He had bought the New Jersey Generals or the New York Generals football team to start a rival to the NFL, and he accepted our song and said, "All right, we'll come in and we'll make a deal and we'll make some arrangements. I'll be in touch with you in a couple of weeks." And the next week, the whole league folded, so that never happened. But we came close. Almost sold a song to Donald Trump. And the whole thing has just been a joy. It's a very nice thing. My wife used to tease me because Roger would call up on the phone. She said, "You guys are like Ishtar. You're like Dustin Hoffman and the other guy from Ishtar." And we would listen to melodies and sing songs over the phone. "Oh, that's it. That's right. No, change that word. No, okay, do this, do that." We had nothing but a ball. And there once, and I'm just going to close this whole little story on one note. It's been nothing but a joy, and I'm still anxious to go out there and push some of the songs that we wrote because I think we've never properly pushed them. You have to hustle them. And there was an ad years ago in the newspaper that involving Sammy Kahn, which was really very, very cute. They said, "Oh, the famous songwriter Sammy Kahn." It was for 9X. It was then the big telephone company in the country. And 9X asked Sammy Kahn, famous songwriter, "Sammy, what comes first, the words or the music?" And Sammy said, "The phone call." You don't get the phone call. You don't write the words and you don't write the music. So I'm still waiting for the phone call. And hopefully one day we'll get one. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.
The Yanks and the Mets, the Giants and the Jets, the Knicks and the Nets. We cheer for 'em all, watch 'em play ball, and look what it gets.